Hey y'all, it's Dr. Lee Pope. Today we'll be talking about pet foods, how to choose a food for your dog or cat. This will be the first part of the video, so we're going to talk about raw diets in this first video. Raw diets are barf diets, bones and raw food, B-A-R-F. Some of y'all might have heard of that, some of y'all might not have. So today we'll talk about why people like it and why I don't like it. Right now, I can tell you I'm not a fan of it. And we'll go through the reasons for that and how to counter-argue with people's arguments that it's a good diet. So, what the people that like it will tell you, bones are good for their teeth. It'll keep their teeth clean. They have a shinier coat. They have less stool output, and that it's how they used to eat in the wild. So the bones do help keep their teeth clean, but we don't need to feed them chicken bones for that. We worry about real bones splintering or getting stuck in their GI tract. If they splinter or a little piece breaks off, it can poke a hole in their GI tract and it can get stuck somewhere in their throat. We've all seen that dog that's chewing on a chicken bone and we walk by them and they gulp it down because they don't want us to take it. So now that chicken bone could be stuck in the throat, could get stuck in the stomach, or it could get stuck in the intestines. Bones that we do like are what's called nyla bones. They're big, hard bones that the dogs can chew on that don't break down. So they're made in the U.S., and we just need to make sure that they're size appropriate. Again, we don't need to get a Great Dane a little tiny nyla bone for to chew on because it's just going to swallow. We need to make sure that they're size appropriate, and they do have big bones. That way the bigger dogs can chew on them. And they say made in the U.S., so just make sure it says that. So the bones doesn't need to be a chicken bone. It can be a nyla bone to keep the teeth clean. The shinier coat, I really haven't seen that on raw diets to where the coat just looks so much better. If the dog's on a high quality diet, the coat looks pretty good anyway. The stool output, if we're on a high quality diet again, there's going to be less stool output. If you're feeding your dog kibbles and bits, it's going to be pooping all the time because it's a lower quality and there's a lot of corn gluten meal in it. So there's not a lot of digestible material in there, so the dog's going to poop out a lot. If we're on a high quality diet, then there's going to be less stool output, just like with the raw diet. So we're not going to necessarily see a big difference between stool output with a manufactured and a raw diet. How they hunt it in the wild, that's fine, but our Chihuahuas are not wolves anymore. It's been thousands of years since they've been out roaming the prairie. And the same with cats. They're not in Africa chasing down zebras anymore. They're sitting in your house, eating regular food, climbing up a cat tree. So they've evolved throughout the years and adapted to different kinds of foods. So they don't necessarily need this raw food anymore. There's plenty of diets that we have that can meet their needs. The most important thing with cats is that they are strict carnivores. You cannot have a cat that's a vegetarian. They will die. They need meat because they need a certain amino acid from that meat that they can't make from vegetation. Dogs are like us, they're omnivores. They can eat meat and they can also eat vegetation. So they can get minerals and nutrients from vegetables, leafy vegetables, corn, stuff like that. Most important thing is cats are strict carnivores. Meat, they need meat in their diet. I cannot stress that enough. You cannot make your cat a vegetarian. So if you're doing a raw diet for the cat, it's got to have some meat in it. Dogs can get away with not eating meat, but can be kind of a pain. So that's what proponents say about the raw diet, and those are my counter arguments for not wanting to do that, because we don't need to do that when we have very safe alternatives to do. The two main reasons that I don't like the raw diet, first of all, how much are we feeding? We don't really know. You can say a cup of this. Well, if we break it down, how many calories is in that amount that you're feeding? If your dog or your cat's overweight, that's our first question. Well, how much are we feeding? Well, some veggies and some chicken. Well, how many calories is that? Because we need to know either you're feeding way too much or you're not feeding enough. And we don't need to just look at the animal and say, well, he looks kind of fat, so I guess I maybe need to cut back a little bit, or, you know, he looks a little skinny to me, let's bump it up a little bit. We don't need to do that. We need to make sure that we're giving them the correct amount. So knowing how much that we're feeding is pretty important. Is it well and balanced? Are they getting all the vitamins and minerals that they need? Unless you're working with a nutritionist, you really don't know. You can't just throw down some chicken and put a carrot on top and say, well, that's all the vitamins and minerals that they need. That's not necessarily the case. We need to make sure that they're getting all the vitamins and minerals that they need, which are manufactured foods are labeled for that, and we'll go over that some more. The next thing that I'm not a fan of is the risk of salmonella. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, but wait a minute, dogs don't get salmonella the way that people do. They're not affected by it the same way. That's very true. I'm not arguing that fact, and hopefully no vet would argue that fact. They don't necessarily get affected by it the same way that we do. Where they neglect to tell you is that the dogs don't destroy the salmonella. It passes through them, and it's in their mouth, and it's on their back end, and it's on their feet. And then we get salmonella. Your grandmother, your baby gets salmonella. So when a dog or cat eats the food and then the salmonella is passing through, sure, maybe they go outside, go to the bathroom, they go to the litter box, and they're not pooping in the middle of the floor, but they're not sanitizing themselves back there. They don't wipe their back end. They don't wash their feet. They don't wash their mouth out every time after they're done eating. So then they come inside and they're spreading the bacteria inside. They come, they sit on the carpet, they put their feet on you, they lick your leg, they lick your hand. So they can be a reservoir for this salmonella, and they can spread it throughout the house. Now, if you're a healthy individual, good immune system, if you get salmonella, you may be sick for a day or so, some diarrhea, decent amount of diarrhea. Not horrible. A couple days, most of the time you can get over it on your own. Older or really young people, it's usually not the case. They're usually ending up in the hospital. Now, another bacteria, there was another study that was done that showed that some of these manufactured raw diets that you can just buy at the store had listeria in it. Now, listeria is another foodborne bacteria, but it's a lot more severe than just salmonella. It doesn't matter how healthy you are. If you get listeria, you end up in the hospital. You're on IV fluids, IV antibiotics, and it's a pretty serious issue. If you're older or younger, it's even more serious. So my main issue is the chance of the dog spreading the infection to us. Everybody knows once you handle raw chicken, you need to wash your hands, you need to clean the counter real well. That's fine, but do you wash your dog's rear end? Do you wash your cat's rear end? Do you rinse their mouth out with antiseptic? Do you clean their feet? Most people are not going to do that. So you're leaving yourself open to catch an infection just because you're wanting to feed your dog like they're hunting in the wild. That's not necessarily the case. We don't need to do that, mainly because we can end up sick. And a lot of proponents for raw diet, they forget to tell you that. They love to tell you that dogs don't get sick from salmonella, which is true, but they leave out the fact that we get sick from it and the dogs spread it throughout the house. So main reasons I don't like it: how much of it are we feeding? It's really tough to tell. Are they overweight, underweight? Are they getting enough? Is it well and balanced? And the risk of spreading foodborne illnesses from the dog to us. They spread it throughout the house, and there's a decent chance that we could one day end up getting sick just because we're feeding them a raw diet. So those are the main issues I have with the raw diet. I'd rather stick with the manufactured diet. I trust them a lot more than just a random raw diet. So the next video we'll go over how to choose a manufactured diet, the companies that I like, why I like them, and what to look for on the bag. So I appreciate you watching it, and I hope you watch the next one. Thank you.